Hi guys, and welcome to or welcome back to the No Gluten Zone. I create content for people with what I call food issues, and that could be allergies, sensitivities, intolerances, or just autoimmune issues that affect your diet. Today is National Dog Day, and so I thought it would be very appropriate to share a video about gluten detection dogs. Hi guys, I wanted to interrupt your previously scheduled video just for one moment and ask for a big favor. So I've had a goal all along to hit 500 subscribers for my channel, and I recently hit 400, and it just makes it feel so close. I'm almost there. So I wanted to ask if you would consider subscribing. It is free. Just click the subscribe, and if you want to be notified of future uploads of videos, you can hit the bell icon. I would so appreciate it. And if you're watching this video at some point in the future when I already have beyond 500 subscribers, then I would still appreciate your subscription, because I guarantee you I have some new updated goal at that time. So I so appreciate each and every one of my subscribers and viewers. And I just wanted to ask for this favor. And also, if you hit the thumbs up or thumbs down, just to show me what you like to see. It helps me plan future videos and that sort of thing. So thank you so much. And now back to your video. This is Brownie. Brownie is 5 years old, and she is a Shepherdor, which is a German Shepherd and Lab mix. She does have some cattle dog mixed in there too. So Brownie is our fully trained gluten detection dog, and she is technically for my son. She's my son's service dog. She is an actual service dog. Gluten detection dog is her task that she performs. This is Ruger. She is a 6-month-old black lab puppy, and she is currently a service dog in training to be a gluten detection dog. So technically she will be my gluten detection dog. So I think gluten detection dog, because everyone knows I have one, is probably the number one thing I get asked about. So I thought it would be really good to make a video about it, and National Dog Day seemed like the perfect day to put the video out. So first, let me just share about service dogs in general a little bit. There are service dogs, and then there are the emotional support animals, SDs versus ESAs. There are some similarities, but there's also some differences. Some of the laws involving this can vary from state to state. So let me preface all of this by saying I'm in California, and I am most familiar with California laws. So some of what I say might be different in your state. So look into it if you really need to know for sure. But I'm going to start from this point where I am. Service dogs are regulated under the Department of Justice, the DOJ in California, whereas emotional service animals, ESAs, are regulated under the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the HUD, or people usually call it HUD. So they fall under very different things. A service dog, to break it down to its bottom line, has to perform a task or tasks that are related to a person's disability. So if you technically have a disability, so for me, celiac disease is a legally recognized disability. So that is my disability, and I have a service dog that performs a task that is related to that disability and helps me manage that disability. So that is what is required in order to have a service dog. I've seen a lot of questions and people saying, I want a service dog. What is your disability? Some people are like, I want it to guard me and protect me. Well, that's not really related to a disability, so that doesn't work. That doesn't fall under service dog. If you are out in public with your service dog, places that you go to are legally allowed to ask you 2 questions, and that is this a service dog? And then the second one would be, what task or tasks does it perform for you? So they can't technically ask you what your disability is, But in some cases, it may be very apparent. Like in my case, she detects gluten. So then you're going to know that I have some sort of disability related to gluten. But there are a lot of types of tasks. Some are like mobility related tasks. Some are scent driven tasks. There's a lot of different scent driven tasks, not just detecting allergens and that sort of thing. And even it's not a service dog, but there are a lot of scent detection dogs in general used by police and security, sniffing out drugs, bombs, all sorts of stuff, right? So another big misunderstanding that I see a lot of people have, and I myself had way back when I first heard about gluten detection dogs, is that it is so expensive and it's unattainable, and it will cost you, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe $100,000. All these numbers get thrown around out there on the internet, and people believe it. And I fell victim to that initially as well. There are a couple of different options with getting a service dog. There are organizations out there that take a puppy or a young dog and they train it for certain tasks. And you can probably get in touch with one of these organizations and say, I need this kind of dog. And when they get one and they get it trained, then they'll let you know. That is going to be very, very expensive because they're putting a lot of time and effort one-on-one into this dog. And not just their work, they're housing the dog, they're feeding the dog, there's a lot involved in that. So that is going to be the most expensive option. There is another option where you can get your dog and you can work with a trainer and train it. And I have to say, this can depend on your task, but for gluten detection, this is actually the better choice. It's much more affordable, but just because you are going to be the one working with this dog in the long run, and you need to know your dog. So you have to keep in mind, these are not machines, these are not robots, these are animals. And they can be unpredictable at times, and you have to know your dog. You have to know if your dog is focused, if it's paying attention, if it's really doing the job, because they can have off days, they can get distracted, and it's not always an obvious distraction, and they can give you a false result just because of being distracted or just being tired. There's a lot of things. So you need to be watching your dog and know, like, yes, this was an accurate response, or no, I'm not so sure about that. Let's try that again. You have to know those things. And so if someone else just trains this dog and hands it to you, you also have to know how to work with it and get it to do what you need it to do. Those are things it can vary somewhat from dog to dog, because you kind of have to know the dog, see the dog, what kind of alerting are you going to train it. You look at what is naturally working with this particular dog. So that can be different with different dogs. So you can't just train a dog and hand it to someone and be like, here you go, and you just know what to do with the dog and how it does it, and to know the dog like in a personal sense, if that makes sense. So it is actually better if you are the one training the dog and working with the dog from day one. Another common confusion is just the whole legality of service dogs. Service dogs do have a lot more protections than ESAs as far as legally. One of the big ones is people are like, is your dog certified? Is it registered? There's like all these terms, and there are companies out there offering this stuff. And those are just, it's not legit. It's not required. There is no registry. There is no certification. There is none of that actually exists, at least at this time. There are companies telling you that, offering that, and people are wasting their money on those things. I have seen some people say it was just easier, like especially people who rent their housing and they're not allowed to have a pet, but they have a service dog. Sometimes they say they just pay the money. They know it's not legal, but it's just easier to deal with their landlord to just show them that, but then the rest of us are like, no, because you're just perpetuating these falsehoods, and then they're expecting it from other people, and other people are like, that's not real, and it just continues all of this confusion. So it's really better if you just know what's right, what's true, and stick to it, and we all get everyone educated in that way. I will put in the description box links to, the ADA, DOJ, all of that, the legal stuff that I am aware of and that I have referenced myself many times. I have a couple of different, I think I have some for California, some for Arizona, because we travel quite a bit. Some states do offer the same protections as of service dogs to service dogs in training, and some do not. And they don't have those recognized protections until they are fully trained. We were traveling recently to Idaho, so we went through, California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Idaho. And I did look because we had Ruger with us, the puppy, who is a service dog in training. And I did check. And with all of those states, she had all of the full protections of a service dog, even though she's in training. But not all states do. So you need to really look at the laws specific to your state and make sure you know what is right, because there's so much confusion out there. You're going to encounter people who don't know what's right. So you need to know, and you need to be willing to defend yourself and educate them nicely in the process. I also wanted to touch on benefits of a service dog versus, there's a lot of different tester units out there. The Nima was the original one that I had, and I still have, and I still love, although the company is having a lot of issues at the time. And there are a couple of other ones out there as well. And I have done videos on this before. If you've seen them, gluten detection dog versus the Nima sensor, I did a short on that before. But I love both. There are pros and cons to both, but I will just highlight some of the pros with a gluten detection dog versus a tester. You can test, surface areas. You could test things like, toilet paper, paper towels, and yes, some of those things do contain gluten before I get told, like, what's the point of testing that? Sometimes there are limitations with certain testers where, you can't do medications or supplements. That's a big area that you do need to make sure is gluten-free. So most testers you can, but there are some that maybe can't. So I'm just saying that could be a bonus. But then you also have to look at, caring for this dog. They need exercise, they need a lot of care, they need a proper diet. It is very important, if you have a gluten detection dog, that it's not eating food that contains gluten, which is hard to do. Most dog foods out there are not consistently gluten-free, even grain-free. If they say grain-free, they say gluten-free. We've bought them, we've tested them, we've had the dog check it. They are not consistently gluten-free. So what we have chosen to do is put our dogs on a raw diet. And I personally feel that is the healthiest diet for a dog. And it's a little, I've always done like a kind of a DIY raw, which is a little more work. There's a lot of, weighing and portioning out foods in my kitchen. It's not that bad with Brownie because she's an adult, full-grown dog. But I will say it is more work with a puppy because there's different age ranges and weight ranges, and it is constantly fluctuating for her at this time. And it will, for most, like your normal sized breeds, that will stop at 12 months. But because she's a Labrador and a larger breed, it will continue until 18 months. So we still have a whole nother year of adjusting her food portions on a pretty consistent basis. We do weigh her once a week. She was born on a Friday. I weigh her every Friday and keep adjusting food stuff for her. So it is more expensive and more time consuming for her in this puppy phase, but it's like easy peasy for Brownie, honestly. So just for reference, Brownie gets a pound of food each day, and I do 2 meals a day. So she gets half a pound in the morning, half a pound in the evening. And right now at 6 months, Ruger is 50 pounds, same as Brownie, but because it's the puppy thing, she is actually getting 2.5 pounds of food each day. So she gets 1.25 in the morning and 1.25 in the evening, just for reference, but that is very individual to each dog. But it is by their age and their weight. And then as adults, there's always a range, like, for adult dogs, I think it's 2 to 5% range. That range depends on your dog's activity level and your specific dog. And a lot of it comes down to looking at your dog, you know, watching them physically to make sure, you know, you want them to have the defined waistline, but you don't want ribs sticking out, right? So, and you can monitor and adjust periodically to keep them at their ideal weight. I know in the past I posted images, graphics on your dog's ideal weight. I will put a link to those again in the description box so you can see that. So moving on to what's probably the most interesting part of this video is how to train your dog. So with Brownie, we originally just got a puppy for our son. It was for his 11th birthday. And it was in the back of my mind, what if I could train this dog to detect gluten? And it took a while. Brownie is the first dog I've raised through as a puppy, like from puppy on. And she will always be credited as the dog that turned me into a dog person. She will always be very, very precious to me and special place in my heart. And the whole learning this whole puppy thing, you know, was pretty overwhelming for me. And so I was not tackling the idea of gluten detection until she was a little over a year. I finally was like, okay, we're good. We got this. Let me see what it would take. So I had her professionally evaluated by a trainer, and she passed with flying colors. I think I've told this story before, but in case you haven't heard it, what they did was they found that she loves balls. She loves tennis balls. So they were working with her with a tennis ball, and then he threw the ball into this room that was just full of just junk everywhere, like, you know, chairs like just laying on their sides and just all this junk. And he just threw the tennis ball into the room and told her to go get it. And she had already been playing with it at this point, you know, she had the scent of it, and she went into the room to get the ball, and she got distracted by this bucket. There was a bucket there with a lid on it, and my heart sank because I thought she failed. This is just, it's not gonna work. And the guy saw my face and he was like, it's okay, it's okay. And he pulled out the bucket and he showed me what was in the bucket. It was a bucket full of tennis balls. And he said he'd never seen that before, a dog do that before. And he said for her to pick up that scent through this bucket with a lid, you know, sealed up, he said that was amazing. So she passed with flying colors, and I did get some work with them. I also talked to dog handlers. So there are trainers and there are handlers, and I talked with both. I got a lot of information and we proceeded. And so with Ruger, it's been a little bit different because we're starting at a much younger age. Of course, you have to keep in mind that she's young, her attention span is short, she's not capable of quite as much when she's that young. So it has to be more age appropriate for her, whereas with Brownie, we just kind of like went into it. So with Brownie, we started with teaching her 2 commands. One is going to be for gluten positive and one is going to be for gluten negative. And so with Brownie, we did a paw raise for gluten positive and a nose bump for gluten negative. She just kind of naturally would bump us with her nose, and so we just captured that and trained it to be done on command, and we used it for gluten-free. So then once she had those 2 commands down, we then introduced the 2 samples. They need to look identical, 2 identical jars, and one contains gluten and one contains something that is gluten-free. And so then you have her sniff the jar and you tell her which command goes with that jar. And then eventually, as time goes on, and you can kind of wait on telling her the command and see when she starts getting it and connecting it. And then after doing that for a while, you start transitioning into food versus just those specific samples. Now with the gluten-free sample, I was rotating different things through there. One of the things I learned from a dog handler, he handled dogs that were trained to detect undetonated explosives. And so he taught me something very interesting, because he said that, you know, the difference in an explosive when it's undetonated and detonated, they're very different scents. And the dog was trained to only detect undetonated, even though it was the same thing, right? And so he mentioned to me, what if gluten is cooked? Will it change in some way? He didn't know. He's like, that's not my area of expertise. I just handle my dog. But he said that was something to consider. And so I did look into that. And I did make sure as we transferred over to foods to start incorporating, not just that gluten sample, but, I went out and bought pretzels, crackers, more baked things to make sure that she also had the scent from cooked gluten. And then I also made sure I incorporated rye and barley sources of gluten in there, as well as the wheat. I don't know why, and I'm curious to watch and see how Ruger ends up reacting. But for Brownie, when it's a rye source of gluten, she responds like over the top. Like, I don't know if it has more gluten in it or if she can just smell it more clearly somehow. But anytime it's a rye-based product that she is checking for gluten, the response is just like very exaggerated. It's very interesting. And eventually we just moved into food, and the only thing I can say beyond that, because you're pretty much done at that point, is to always continue training. Don't think like, oh, my dog is trained and we're good. You have to always be reminding, refreshing, keeping the training going. So it is something just to keep in mind, that you always want to keep it going. Just, you can make it into games, you can make it fun, but they do need to keep it fresh and keep the training, and make sure you keep that scent of gluten imprinted on the dog. Now with Ruger, because she's younger, we started with playing Find the Gluten, which I do that with Brownie at times, but it wasn't where we started, and it hasn't really been a major part of her training. It was just kind of more of a fun thing to do occasionally to keep, especially once she was trained. It was like, then I did it to keep the scent imprinted on her. But that's where I started with Ruger, because she was young, and she did great. She loves the game. It's so exciting to her when she finds it. So that's where I started. And then I am also working on the 2 commands, and it took a little bit of work to get that nose bump in her, but she does do nose bumps. She does like super little delicate nose bumps compared to Brownie, but she does do them. I did get it trained in her. I transferred it over. And so she is also training for paw raise for gluten positive and nose bump for gluten negative. So we're doing Find the Gluten and the 2 commands, and I am just now at 6 months introducing the scent with telling her the command. So that's where we're at with her. It's kind of fun having Brownie and Ruger both playing Find the Gluten, because it's like, who finds it first, and a lot of times it's like they almost like now they're working together to find it, and they both get so excited, like, is that it? Like, yeah, look at that. Like, it's like they're like sharing it with each other. So I reward both of them when they're working on it together. If just one finds it alone, then they get the reward for it. So it's a little bit competitive in nature having the 2 dogs, but they love it. I will say that we don't eat out often, and a lot of times when we do, we go to a dedicated gluten-free restaurant that we've never had issues at. I am aware of some dedicated gluten-free places that have had issues, and it's something that was already contaminated before it arrived to them, so it wasn't their fault, but it can happen. And so I am normally very cautious, but we really trust this place. I normally I wouldn't use my Nima sensor there. But as part of keeping the dog trained, especially as far as public service access training goes, that is a whole nother component to the training of a service dog. I spoke today on the task of gluten detection training, but the dog also has to have the public service access training as well to be out in the public as a service dog. And so, to keep that going and to keep the dog on point, we do take her even when we go to the dedicated gluten-free restaurant, because we don't eat out often. We do take her with us and have her check and go through the whole routine, and she loves it, and she gets her reward for doing all of that. But in summary, I will wrap this up here, and then I will insert a clip of Brownie demonstrating. I have shared this before. I have a shorts out there of showing her checking for gluten, but I will include it at the end of this video. But in summary, you know, a gluten detection dog or any service dog can be life changing. I mean, it really has for us. But it's definitely not for everyone, you know, and the same way, you know, like a Nima sensor isn't for everyone. I was diagnosed originally in 2012 and I got my Nima sensor in 2016. And, you know, I always say like my first 2 years were just nonstop mistakes and learning and struggles, lots of mistakes and struggling and panicking. And so I was very eager when the Nima sensor, I waited a long time to get it. I was planning, I knew about it before it came out. And that to me, that was life-changing and really helpful. And I remember at the time, there were a lot of people who were like, I've been diagnosed for years and I'm doing just fine. I have found my ways of navigating and managing and I'm okay. I don't need that. And I totally get that. We're all different and we all have our own ways of navigating it. And that's great. I think the timing of the Nima coming out and as I was coming into this diagnosis, really, I loved it and I still love it. I wish we could get more of that kind of equipment out here for the people and also more service dogs to be more accessible and more education on it for it to be more recognized and accepted and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I can totally see that a gluten detection dog is not for everyone. You know, some people are allergic to dogs, for one, you know, but dogs are work. You know, you have to care for this dog, you have to feed this dog, you have to exercise the dog and, you know, train the dog and keep the dog trained. And there's a lot that goes into it. I personally am an animal lover, and now because of Brownie, I am a dog lover specifically, for sure. And it's life-changing. I absolutely love it that I can have her check anything just like that. But I totally understand that it is not for everyone. So I would love if you would leave in the comments if you have a service dog and what type, or if you want one, you know, which kind of service dog would you want? Like, I would just love to have conversation in the comments if you'd be willing to do that. And I would so appreciate like, thumbs up or thumbs down if this is not the kind of content you want to see in the future. And a subscribe would be so wonderful. So that's it for me. I am going to say have a great day, guys, and God bless you. And then I will attach a clip of Brownie checking for gluten. Brownie, can you check? Good girl. Here's a treat. And then can you check this? Yeah, that one's gluten-free. So we get a nose bump. Atta girl. And here's Rugers. Girls, can you look at the camera?